Hi, welcome to the channel and please subscribe. You know we all get married, and for us girls, there's a lot of adjusting and a ton of responsibility that lands on our shoulders afterward. My arranged marriage had been set up by my parents. I had a year to get to know the family. I chat with my future mother-in-law, Elara, once or twice a week. She seemed so cool. She even talked about going to clubs and doing adventurous things on weekends. She'd always say I was like a daughter to her. I was ecstatic and couldn't wait for the wedding. But after the wedding, things changed. We are living in a rented apartment, and Elara had no idea I was the one paying the $2,500 rent for our Riverbend apartment after marriage. She actually demanded I leave so her daughter Serafina and Serafina's husband Gareth could start a family there. The very next day, I called the movers, packed everything, and got ready to go. Seeing me actually leave, Elara panicked, realizing too late what she'd pushed for. The bank statement clutched in my hands showed a balance with $4,500. Damien's paycheck stub, crumpled on our kitchen counter, revealed he'd earned only $1,200 last month. Our rent alone was $2,500. The math didn't add up, and suddenly, years of my marriage started making perfect sense. I set the papers down carefully, my fingers trembling slightly as the reality washed over me. For 5 years, I'd been living in a carefully constructed fantasy where Damien was the provider and I was just helping out with my part-time pharmacy job. But these numbers told a different story entirely. I was the one keeping us afloat, and somehow everyone in this family had convinced themselves otherwise. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. Just yesterday, Elara had bragged to her bridge club about Damien's success, gesturing around our spacious downtown apartment in Emerald City with obvious pride. "My son works so hard to give his family a comfortable life," she had announced while serving coffee in the expensive cups I'd bought during a holiday sale at Sterling department store. I walked to our living room and looked around with new eyes. The leather sectional where Elara spent her afternoons watching soap operas, purchased with my overtime pay after working 3 consecutive weekends. The dining table where we ate mostly silent dinners, bought with money from my evening shifts when Damien claimed he was working late. Even the coffee maker Elara used every morning came from my employee discount at the pharmacy, where I'd picked up extra hours to cover our utilities. 5 years ago, standing at the altar in my simple white dress, I'd believed Damien's promises about acceptance and love. His voice had been so sincere when he held my hands and swore that my infertility wouldn't matter to anyone who truly cared about me. "My family will be your family," he'd whispered during our first dance, spinning me slowly while his mother watched from the head table with that particular smile I'd learned to recognize. But Elara's expression that wedding day should have warned me that what was coming. Her congratulations had been perfectly polite, but there was something calculating in her eyes, like she was already planning how to minimize my role in their lives. During the reception, she made sure every guest understood I was a replacement rather than a choice, describing Damien's first wife, Lillian, as the love of his life who gave us our precious Serafina. 8-year-old Serafina had been my biggest puzzle from the beginning. Damien insisted her silence around me was normal childhood adjustment, but I knew better. She'd chatter happily with her father and grandmother, then go completely quiet whenever I tried to join their conversations. When I offered to help with her homework or asked about her school friends, she'd give me polite one-word answers before finding an excuse to leave the room. The truth about Serafina's behavior became clear during her 5th grade spring play rehearsal. I'd volunteered to help with costume alterations, desperate to find some way to connect with my stepdaughter through something she enjoyed. While kneeling behind the costume rack in the Riverbend School auditorium, pinning hems and adjusting sleeves, I overheard a conversation that explained everything. "Some women just aren't meant to be mothers," Elara was telling another parent near the stage, her voice carrying further than she probably intended. "They try so hard to force themselves into families where they don't belong. It's almost painful to watch sometimes." The other mother made a sympathetic murmur, encouraging Elara to continue. "My granddaughter has been through enough changes already. She doesn't need another mother figure confusing her about where her loyalties should lie. Children need consistency, not someone trying to replace their real parent." I kept my head down, pretending to focus on the costume work, while my heart hammered against my ribs. When I finally looked up, Elara was staring directly at me with that same cold smile from our wedding reception. She'd known I was listening to every word. That evening, I confronted Damien about what I'd heard and Serafina's increasingly distant behavior toward me. He rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache. Mom's just protective of Serafina. You have to understand, Lillian's death was traumatic for everyone involved. Mom stepped in immediately to help raise Serafina, and they developed this incredibly close bond. But what does that have to do with Serafina refusing to acknowledge my existence? These family dynamics are complicated. You can't force emotional connections. They have to develop naturally over time. Except time wasn't helping anything. If anything, Serafina's rejection was becoming more obvious and deliberate. She'd started calling me Damien's wife instead of using my name, even in direct conversation. During family dinners, she'd ask her father to pass messages to me rather than speak to me directly, despite sitting just 2 feet away. The financial deception had begun innocently during Damien's career troubles 3 years into our marriage. His architecture firm, Apex Designs, struggled when the economy declined and construction projects were canceled throughout Emerald City. His paychecks became irregular and significantly smaller, while our expenses remained the same. This is just temporary, Damien kept reassuring me as I picked up additional shifts at the pharmacy. The market will bounce back soon and things will return to normal. I didn't mind working longer hours initially. The pharmacy gave me purpose and independence. Plus, I genuinely enjoyed helping customers with their medications and health questions. What bothered me was how quickly Damien and Elara seemed to forget about my increased contributions to our household financials.
Cheap and embarrassed him when colleagues visited for dinner. I spent weeks researching furniture options and saved enough money to buy a beautiful solid wood table with 6 matching chairs. When the delivery truck arrived, Damien assumed his latest commission had been larger than expected. "This looks fantastic," he said, running his hand along the polished surface. "I'm really glad we could finally afford to upgrade our dining room." I didn't correct his assumption. It felt harmless to let him maintain his pride as the family provider while I quietly contributed to our shared happiness. But that small deception became a pattern that grew larger and more complex over time. The leather sectional sofa came from weeks of overtime pay. The new washer and dryer set required a month of weekend shifts. The 65-inch television that Elara loved to brag about to her friends cost me 2 months of evening hours, but she credited Damien's recent promotion when anyone asked about it. Eventually, I was paying our entire $2,500 monthly rent without anyone's knowledge. When Damien's income dropped to almost nothing during his worst period, I quietly arranged with our landlord to handle the payments directly. I asked them to continue addressing statements to Damien to avoid uncomfortable questions about our financial arrangements. Living this elaborate lie became exhausting, but I convinced myself it was temporary and necessary for family harmony. I told myself these financial sacrifices would eventually pay off in family acceptance. But Elara had different plans for my future. The systematic destruction of my self-worth began with small exclusions that grew into calculated cruelty over the 3 years that followed. The first major blow came during Serafina's sophomore parent-teacher conference. I'd requested the afternoon off from the pharmacy, something I rarely did since we needed every hour of my income. I even bought a new navy dress, wanting to look professional when meeting Serafina's teachers for the first time as her stepmother. I prepared a list of thoughtful questions about her academic progress and college preparation, genuinely excited to be included in this important aspect of her life. I was standing in our hallway with my purse in hand, keys ready, when Elara emerged from the kitchen wearing her best coat and carrying her leather handbag. "Where are you going?" she asked, looking genuinely confused. "To Serafina's parent-teacher conference. It starts at 4 p.m. Elara's expression shifted to something between pity and amusement. "Oh, honey, you don't need to come. Serafina's family has always been just Damien and me for these things. We have our routine, and adding another person would just complicate the dynamic with her teachers." The words landed like physical blows. I watched through our front window as Damien helped his mother into the passenger seat of his car, neither of them looking back at me standing alone in the apartment I was paying for, wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for an event I'd been excluded from at the last moment. That evening, when they returned full of stories about Serafina's excellent grades and her teacher's compliments, I asked Damien why he hadn't mentioned I was planning to attend. "I figured Mom had talked to you about it," he said, not meeting my eyes. "She's been handling Serafina's school stuff since she was little. It's just easier to keep things consistent." The kitchen became Elara's primary battlefield after Serafina moved out for college. For years, she'd shared cooking duties, making elaborate meals and teaching Serafina family recipes I was never invited to learn. But once Serafina left, Elara announced she was tired of all that work and cooking responsibilities fell entirely to me. Every evening became a performance where Elara would sit at our dining table, the one I'd purchased, and critique my efforts with theatrical disgust. She'd cut into my chicken with exaggerated sawing motions, declaring it drier than cardboard, before pushing her plate away dramatically. When I made rice, she'd take a single bite and announce she'd never tasted such flavorless grain in her entire life. The cruelest part was her reaction when I asked for help. I found her old recipe box one afternoon and tried to recreate Serafina's favorite pot roast, following every instruction precisely. When Elara tasted it, she shook her head sadly. "This isn't even close to how it's supposed to taste. You're doing everything wrong." "Could you show me the right way? I'd love to learn." "Some people just don't have natural cooking instincts. You can't teach what isn't there." She'd watch me struggle in the kitchen every night, offering criticism but never assistance, turning meal preparation into daily proof of my inadequacy. When Damien complimented my cooking, she'd interrupt with comments like, "Well, it's edible, I suppose." Cleaning became another source of constant humiliation. Elara appointed herself supervisor of my housekeeping, conducting daily inspections with military precision. She'd run her finger along baseboards I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees, declaring them dusty. She'd unfold laundry I'd spent an hour organizing, refolding towels with sharp, angry movements while sighing dramatically. "Your mother clearly didn't teach you proper housekeeping," became her favorite insult, perfectly crafted to attack both my abilities and my deceased mother's memories simultaneously. I'd watch her redo work I'd already completed, her message clear. Nothing I did would ever meet her standards. She'd inspect the bathroom after I cleaned it, finding imaginary spots on mirrors I'd polished until they gleamed. She'd reorganize kitchen cabinets I'd arranged carefully, claiming my system made no sense. When our refrigerator broke down on a sweltering summer morning, I didn't hesitate to buy a replacement. We needed to preserve our food, and I knew Damien's irregular income couldn't handle such a large, unexpected expense. I researched models, compared prices, and arranged delivery for the next day. Elara was waiting when the appliance store truck arrived. She directed the delivery men like she'd orchestrated the entire purchase, discussing features and warranty details as if she'd chosen every specification. That afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "Damien surprised us with the beautiful new refrigerator yesterday, stainless steel with all the modern features. He worked so hard to provide nice things for his family." The pattern repeated with every purchase I made. New curtains became Damien's thoughtful home improvement. A replacement vacuum cleaner became his practical gift to make housework easier. Even small items like new dish towels or coffee mugs were credited to his generosity and good taste. I was funding my own invisibility, buying comfort and convenience that others received credit for, while I remained unacknowledged. Damien's behavior changed gradually but noticeably during this period. He began coming home later each evening, claiming increased work pressure and important client meetings. Our conversations became purely functional, discussions about bill due dates, household repairs, and schedule coordination. The emotional intimacy we'd once shared disappeared completely. When I tried to talk about Elara's treatment of me, his responses became predictable and dismissive. Mom's older. She's set in her ways. Just try to let it roll off your back. Been through a lot with Dad's death and Serafina moving away. She's just adjusting to changes. It's been 3 years, Damien. How much adjustment time does she need? He'd sigh heavily like I was being unreasonably demanding. Some people process grief differently. You need to be more patient and understanding. Our bedroom became a place of polite distance. Damien would come home exhausted, claiming work stress, and fall asleep immediately after dinner. Weekend conversations focused on practical matters, grocery lists, home maintenance, social obligations we'd attend separately since Elara preferred family events to remain traditional. The most painful realization was understanding that Damien genuinely didn't see what was happening. He'd grown up with Elara's manipulation and considered her behavior normal family dynamics. When she criticized my cooking in front of him, he'd nod sympathetically, like her complaints were reasonable feedback. When she excluded me from family decisions, he'd explain it as protecting me from unnecessary stress. I began to feel like a paying guest in my own home, tolerated but not welcomed, useful but not valued. Every morning I'd wake up in our bed, look around our apartment filled with furniture I'd bought, and wonder how I'd become so invisible in my own life. The systematic nature of Elara's campaign became clear over time. She wasn't randomly cruel. She was methodically destroying my confidence and place in the family structure. Every criticism, every exclusion, every credit stolen from my contributions was part of a larger strategy to prove I didn't belong. And the most devastating part was how well it was working. I was drowning in my own invisibility when Serafina's phone call changed everything. The arrival of first real grandchild. The sound of our landline ringing at 6 a.m. cut through the usual silence of our apartment, where Damien and I had been moving around each other like polite strangers for months. "Grandma Elara!" Serafina's voice bubbled through the speakerphone, breathless with excitement. "Gareth and I have news!" I watched Elara's face transform in real time, the perpetual tension lines around her eyes smoothed out and her mouth opened in genuine surprise and delight. When Serafina announced her pregnancy, Elara actually screamed, a sound of pure joy I'd never heard from her before. "My first real grandchild!" she exclaimed, pressing her hands to her chest. "Oh, Serafina, this is the most wonderful news. How far along? When are you due? Are you feeling well? Have you seen a doctor yet?" The words "first real grandchild" stung. But I pushed the feeling aside as I watched this woman who'd made my life miserable suddenly glow with happiness. Her transformation was so complete, it was startling. Within minutes, she was pacing our living room, making mental lists and planning out loud. "We'll need to convert your old room into a nursery, of course. And baby-proofing. Everything will need baby-proofing. Oh, the shopping we have to do. Cribs, car seats, clothes, toys. I can't believe I'm going to be a grandmother." For the first time in years, Elara seemed genuinely happy. And despite everything she'd put me through, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this pregnancy would soften her heart. Maybe becoming a grandmother would help her see me as family instead of an intruder. "This is so exciting," I said carefully, testing the waters. "I'd love to help with preparations however I can." Elara glanced at me briefly, her joy dimming just slightly, but she nodded. "There will be plenty to organize." The shopping spree began the very next day. Elara appeared at breakfast with magazines, catalogs, and printed pages from baby websites spread across our dining room table. She'd been awake since 4 a.m., researching everything from organic cotton onesies to state-of-the-art baby monitors. "We need to get the essentials ordered right away," she announced, circling items with red pen. "The good stuff sells out quickly, and I refuse to let my grandchild settle for second-rate products." I watched our bank account drain with alarming speed. Over the following weeks, every day brought new packages. a deluxe stroller system for $1,500, an organic mattress for $700, designer baby clothes that cost more per outfit than I spent on myself in a month. Elara justified each purchase as absolutely necessary for the baby's health and development. When I gently suggested that Serafina and Gareth might want to choose some items themselves, especially big purchases like cribs and car seats, Elara's response was swift and cutting. "You wouldn't understand the joy of preparing for your own grandchild," she said, not looking up from her latest catalog. "Some women never get to experience this feeling. This is what grandmothers do. We prepare. We provide. We make sure everything is perfect." The implication was clear. I wasn't really going to be this baby's grandmother, so my opinion didn't matter. But despite the sting of her words, I found myself getting caught up in the excitement anyway. After years of feeling useless in this family, here was finally something I could contribute to meaningfully. I volunteered to help prepare Serafina's old bedroom, spending my days off from the pharmacy, cleaning out closets, and researching baby-safe paint options. I bought books about child development and safety, highlighting important sections and leaving them strategically around the apartment where Elara might notice my efforts. In the evenings, I started knitting a baby blanket with soft yellow yarn since we didn't know the gender yet. I'd work on it after dinner while watching television with Damien and Elara, imagining holiday gatherings where I'd finally have a role to play. I pictured myself as the step-grandmother who taught this child to ride a bike or helped with homework. Maybe this baby would be the bridge that finally connected me to this family. "That's lovely work," Damien said, noticing my knitting project. "The baby will treasure that." Even Elara nodded approvingly. Yellow is practical, and handmade gifts are always special. For a few weeks, I allowed myself to believe that everything was changing. Elara included me in discussions about nursery themes and baby gear. She asked my opinion about which high chair offered the best safety features. When packages arrived, she'd show me each item and explain why she'd chosen it. But the financial reality became impossible to ignore. Our savings account, which I'd carefully built up through extra pharmacy shifts and careful budgeting, was disappearing at an alarming speed. Purchase was coming from my pharmacy paychecks, just like everything else in our household. The delusion was so complete that pointing out the truth would destroy what little self-respect he had left. "I just think we should set some limits," I said carefully. "Limits on my mother's joy? On preparing for my grandchild?" The conversation ended there, but the damage was done. I could see the resentment in Damien's eyes, the feeling that I was being stingy about family priorities. He started coming home even later, avoiding discussions about money entirely. The perfect storm arrived 2 months before Serafina's due date when she called crying about Garrett's job loss. The manufacturing plant where he'd worked for years was closing, and they were facing unemployment with a baby on the way. "I don't know what we're going to do," Serafina sobbed over the phone. "Our lease is up next month, and we can't afford to renew it without Garrett's salary. We're going to be homeless with a newborn." My heart broke for them. Despite Serafina's coldness toward me over the years, she was still a young woman facing a terrifying situation. I immediately started thinking about practical solutions. Maybe we could help them find an affordable apartment nearby, contribute to a security deposit, or help with their first few months of expenses. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Elara said into the phone, her voice soothing and confident. "Grandma will figure something out. Family takes care of family." After Serafina hung up, Elara sat quietly at our kitchen table, her expression thoughtful and calculating. I could practically see the wheels turning in her mind as she worked through different scenarios. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She looked at me with that familiar cold smile, and suddenly I knew that whatever solution she was developing wouldn't include my comfort or well-being. "I'm thinking about what's best for Serafina and my grandchild," she said simply. "Sometimes that requires making difficult decisions about priorities." The way she said priorities made my stomach clench with sudden anxiety. After years of systematic humiliation, I recognized that tone. Elara was planning something, and I had a sinking feeling that I was about to discover exactly how expendable she considered me to be. The anxiety from Elara's calculating expression lingered through the night, making sleep impossible. I tossed and turned, replaying her words about difficult decisions and wondering what solution she was planning for Serafina's housing crisis. When Tuesday morning arrived, I dragged myself to the kitchen, expecting another day of subtle hostility and invisible existence. Instead, Elara was sitting at our dining room table with perfect posture, her hands folded neatly in front of her like she was conducting a business meeting. She wasn't reading the newspaper or checking her phone like usual. She was simply waiting, and something about her stillness made my skin crawl. "We need to talk," she said before I could even reach for my coffee mug. The tone was different from anything I'd heard from her before. Not the usual passive-aggressive criticism or theatrical disappointment, but something cold and final. My hand trembled slightly as I poured coffee from the machine I'd bought months ago, the one she'd claimed credit for when her Riverbend Bridge Club friends visited. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Elara's expression was unlike anything I'd seen in years of living with her. Her eyes held a strange satisfaction, like she'd been planning this conversation for years and was finally ready to execute her plan. The morning light from our kitchen window cast sharp shadows across her face, making her look almost predatory. "Since Serafina and Gareth need to start their family properly, you need to leave." The words landed like physical blows. I set my coffee mug down carefully, my mind struggling to process what I just heard. "Leave? What do you mean, leave?" "I mean, pack your belongings and vacate this apartment tomorrow." The casual way she delivered this ultimatum was breathtaking. She might have been discussing the weather or asking me to pick up groceries, but her eyes were sharp and focused, watching my reaction with obvious pleasure. "This is my home too, Elara. Damien and I are married. Serafina needs stability for her child. Gareth needs work, and Damien can help him find opportunities in the architecture field. They need space to build their new life without complications." Complications. Her smile was thin and cruel. "You've been redundant in this family for years. We don't need another mother figure confusing things. Serafina has me for guidance, and the baby will have its real grandmother. Your presence just creates unnecessary tension." I stared at her, my brain refusing to accept what I was hearing. "You can't just kick me out of my own home, can you?" She leaned back in her chair, completely relaxed now that her cards were on the table. "You've been living here as Damien's wife, but that arrangement isn't working for our family's future needs. Tomorrow is your deadline. 24 hours. She was giving me 24 hours to abandon the life I'd spent years building, the apartment I'd been paying for, the furniture I'd bought piece by piece with my pharmacy wages. Where exactly do you expect me to go? That's not really my concern. You're a grown woman with a job. I'm sure you'll figure something out." The cruelty in her voice was staggering, but she wasn't finished. She leaned forward slightly, and I could see years of stored venom finally being released. "You barren failure," she continued, her voice gaining strength from my shocked silence. "Serafina never needed you. Damien never needed you. You've been playing house with someone else's family, pretending you belonged here. Well, the game is over." I felt my legs give out slightly, and I gripped the kitchen counter. "Damien loves me. We've been married for 5 years. Elara's laugh was genuinely delighted, like I'd just told her the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "Love? Is that what you call it when your husband comes home later and later every night? When he stops talking to you about anything meaningful? When he finds comfort elsewhere? The room tilted around me. What are you talking about? It seems like Damien is tired of you too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now. She delivered this information with surgical precision, watching my face crumble as the implications sank in. The casual way she mentioned Damien's affair told me she'd known about it months, possibly years. All those late nights, all those mysterious work emergencies, all those times he avoided my calls during the day. You knew. Of course I knew. Clara is lovely, by the way, young, fertile, actually capable of giving Damien the family he deserves. They've been quite happy together. The betrayal was so complete, so overwhelming that I couldn't form words. Damien wasn't just cheating on me. He was building a whole other life with someone else right under our noses.
Whole new life while I paid for his current one. And Elara had been watching it all unfold, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me with the truth. Clara doesn't know about your little financial arrangements, of course. Damien's been quite clever about maintaining his provider image with her. But once you're gone, that won't matter anymore. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold on to the counter. How long? How long? What? How long has Damien been seeing her? Elara pretended to consider the question. Oh, about 6 months now, right around the time you bought that lovely new television set that Damien claims he purchased for the family. 6 months. While I'd been working extra shifts to pay for our household expenses, while I'd been knitting baby blankets and dreaming about finally finding my place in this family, my husband had been building a relationship with another woman. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and dialed Damien's office number. The receptionist's voice was apologetic but clear. I'm sorry, but Mr. Hawthorne is out of the office today. He's taken several personal days this week. Personal days? He hadn't mentioned to me. I tried his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Voicemail. Damien, it's me. Please call me back. Something's happened and I really need to talk to you. I left 3 more messages, my voice getting more desperate with each one. Elara watched this pathetic display with obvious satisfaction, like she was enjoying a particularly good television show. He's probably with Clara right now, she said conversationally. They spend a lot of time together at that little hotel downtown, the Grandview Inn, I believe. I slumped into a chair at the dining table I'd bought with my overtime pay, surrounded by baby supplies I'd helped purchase in an apartment I'd been secretly funding for years. Everything I thought was real, my marriage, my family, my home, had been an elaborate lie. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why tell me all this now? Why not just let Damien ask for a divorce? Elara's smile was triumphant. Because Serafina needs this apartment, and Damien doesn't have the spine to handle difficult conversations. Besides, this way is more efficient. You disappear, Serafina and Gareth move in, and everyone gets what they actually want. Everyone except me. I was completely alone, sitting in my own kitchen, being evicted from my own life by a woman who'd spent years systematically destroying my confidence and self-worth. And she was enjoying every second of my devastation. The unveiling. I sat in my kitchen for what felt like hours, staring at my phone and waiting for Damien to call back. The silence was deafening, broken only by Elara's occasional satisfied sighs as she flipped through baby catalogs like nothing earth-shattering had just happened. The walls of our apartment, my apartment, seemed to be closing in on me. I'm going for a walk, I announced, grabbing my purse before Elara could respond with another cruel comment. The late afternoon air felt sharp against my face as I wandered aimlessly through downtown Emerald City streets. My legs carried me without conscious direction, past familiar shops and restaurants that held memories of a life I now realized had been built on lies. I found myself standing outside the Clover and Quill,
a cozy Irish pub where Damien and I used to have dinner dates during our first year in this neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. Seeking comfort in a place that reminded me of happier times with the man who was apparently building a new life behind my back? But something drew me inside anyway. Maybe the need for a familiar space where I could think clearly. The interior was dimly lit and nearly empty at this time of day. I slid into a booth near the window and ordered coffee from a young waitress who looked vaguely familiar. When she returned with my drink, she hesitated beside my table. "Mrs. Reynolds, you probably don't remember me, but I'm Chloe. I used to work at the pharmacy down the street before I started here." I looked up at her fresh face and kind eyes, grateful for any human connection that wasn't tainted by years of manipulation and lies. "Of course, Chloe. How are you? I wondered what happened when you left the pharmacy so suddenly." Her expression shifted to something between concern and nervousness. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need to tell you something. I've been wanting to reach out, but I wasn't sure if I should get involved." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "What is it?" Chloe glanced around the nearly empty tavern, then slid into the booth across from me. "Your husband comes in here regularly, with a woman, not you." The words confirmed what I already knew, but hearing them from a witness made everything feel more real and devastating. "How regularly?" "2, sometimes 3 times a week. Always the same booth in the back corner. They're very," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "affectionate with each other." I stared into my coffee cup, processing this information. "How long has this been going on?" "I started working here about 6 months ago, and they were already regulars then." 6 months. Exactly the timeline Elara had mentioned. While I'd been working extra shifts to pay for our household expenses and knitting baby blankets in the evenings, Damien had been maintaining a relationship with another woman just 6 blocks from our apartment. Chloe reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. "I took some pictures. I know it's not really my business, but you've always been so kind to me, and it felt wrong not to say anything." She showed me her phone screen, and I found myself staring at images that shattered the last remnants of my marriage. Damien and a petite blonde woman entering the downtown Grandview Inn hotel, his arm around her waist in a possessive way he hadn't touched me in years. Another photo showed them in the tavern booth, leaning close together over drinks, her hand resting on his cheek. As I stared at these images, something strange happened. The crushing heartbreak I'd expected didn't come. Instead, I felt something harder and more focused crystallizing in my chest, a cold determination I'd never experienced before. "Chloe, could you send these to my phone?" "Of course. And Mrs. Reynolds, I'm really sorry. You deserve so much better than this." The reclamation. Walking home with Chloe's evidence in my phone, my mind started working in ways it never had before. For years, I'd been the accommodating wife, the invisible provider, the woman who absorbed abuse and accepted crumbs. But Elara's ultimatum and Damien's betrayal had freed me from any obligation to protect their feelings or maintain their illusions. If they wanted me gone, I would give them exactly what they asked for. But I wouldn't disappear quietly into the night like some discarded piece of furniture. I would take everything that was truly mine, which, as it turned out, was everything that made their comfortable life possible. Back in our apartment, Elara was on the phone with Serafina, excitedly discussing nursery paint colors. She barely glanced at me when I walked past, too absorbed in her grandmother fantasies to notice the change in my expression. That night, after Damien failed to come home or return any of my calls, I made the phone call would change everything. Prime Movers in Storage, this is Gareth. "I need to schedule a complete household move for tomorrow morning," I said, my voice steadier than it had been all day. "Tomorrow? That's pretty short notice, ma'am. What size home are we talking about?" 3-bedroom apartment. I need everything moved except for 1 bedroom set and some baby supplies. Everything else? Everything. Furniture, appliances, personal belongings. I want the apartment completely cleared of my possessions by tomorrow afternoon. As I scheduled movers and arranged for temporary storage, I felt a strange calm settling over me. If Elara wanted to eliminate me from the family equation, she was about to learn exactly what my elimination would cost them. I spent the entire night documenting years of financial contributions, bank statements, credit card records, store receipts I'd saved for warranty purposes. Everything painted the same picture. The leather sectional sofa, where Elara criticized my cooking every evening, purchased with my overtime pay from the pharmacy. The 65-inch television she bragged about to her friends, 3 months of my weekend shifts. The dining set where we'd eaten mostly silent dinners, my employee discount and careful saving. Item by item, room by room, I documented the truth about who had actually been providing for this family. The washer and dryer that cleaned their clothes, the dishwasher that handled their dishes, the coffee maker that brewed their morning coffee, the bed where Damien and I had slept. All of it purchased with money I'd earned while they lived under the delusion that Damien was the provider. Even the baby supplies scattered throughout the apartment had been bought with my credit cards, though Elara had claimed full credit for every thoughtful purchase. As I packed my personal belongings, clothes, books, photo albums, the jewelry box that still contained my wedding dress receipt, I felt lighter with each sealed box. For years, I had been carrying the weight of this family's financial stability while receiving only criticism and exclusion in return. Tomorrow, I would finally set that burden down. I left out only the essentials I'd need for the next few days, along with one outfit for tomorrow's grand finale. I wanted to look professional and composed when Elara discovered what my departure would actually cost them. By dawn, I was ready. The movers would arrive at 8 a.m. sharp. Elara would wake up to discover that everything she'd taken for granted was about to disappear, just like the woman she'd spent years trying to erase. I sat in my favorite chair, the one I'd bought during my first year of marriage, and watched the sun rise through windows I'd been paying to look through. After years of living as a ghost in my own home, I was about to become very visible indeed. The grand finale. The knock at our door came at exactly 8 a.m., just as I'd requested. I was dressed in my best navy suit, the one I wore to important pharmacy conferences, my hair pulled back professionally. I wanted to look composed and in control for what was about to unfold. "I'll get it," I called out before Elara could move from her spot at the kitchen table, where she was eating the breakfast I'd prepared for the last time. 3 men in matching prime movers and storage uniforms stood in our hallway with clipboards and confident expressions. The crew leader, a stocky man named Mateo, extended his hand. "Mrs. Reynolds, we're here for the full household relocation." Perfect timing. Please come in. I opened the door wide and gestured them inside. Behind me, I heard Elara's coffee cup clatter against her saucer. "What's going on?" she demanded, rising from her chair as the movers began surveying our living room with professional efficiency. "I'm taking everything I bought," I announced, calmly turning to face her. "Which, as it turns out, is everything except your old dresser and the baby supplies." Elara's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror as the movers began their systematic removal of our life. Mateo directed his team with quiet competence while I provided a detailed inventory of exactly what belonged to me. The sectional sofa goes to storage unit B17. Also, the coffee table, end tables, and all the lamps. "Wait, you can't just take our furniture," Elara sputtered, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "It's not our furniture. It's my furniture. purchased with my money from my job. I handed Mateo the receipt file I'd organized the night before. Everything's documented here. Purchase dates, payment methods, warranty information. Watching them wrap and remove the leather sectional where Elara had spent years criticizing my cooking felt surprisingly therapeutic. She stood frozen in the center of our living room as her comfortable world literally disappeared around her. "The dining set too," I instructed, as two movers approached the table where we'd eaten so many silent dinners. Table, chairs, and the matching sideboard. "This is insane," Elara whispered, but I noticed she wasn't actually trying to stop them. Deep down, she knew I was right. The kitchen proved especially satisfying. Out went the dishwasher I bought when our old one broke down, the coffee maker that brewed her morning ritual, the microwave she used to reheat leftovers while complaining about my fresh cooking. Even the refrigerator, the brand new stainless steel model she'd bragged about to her Riverbend Bridge Club friends just 2 weeks ago. "Wait, who's gonna pay for all this?" Elara stammered, gesturing frantically at the increasingly empty space. Her panic was immediate and complete as the reality of my departure hit her. For years, she'd lived under the comfortable assumption that Damien was providing their lifestyle. Now, she was watching that illusion crumble in real time. "I mean, how will we afford to replace everything? How will we even eat without a refrigerator?" "That sounds like a problem for the people who'll be living here," I replied, checking items off my inventory list as the movers worked. "But you can't just leave us with nothing. What about family loyalty? What about supporting each other through difficult times?" I looked at her with the same cold smile she'd perfected over the years. "Some people just aren't meant to be family members. You taught me that." Her frantic pleas continued as room after room was systematically emptied. The bedroom furniture, the washer and dryer, the television that had been the centerpiece of their evening entertainment. All of it disappeared into the moving truck while Elara watched in growing desperation. By 10 a.m., Damien's key was turning in the front door. He walked in with Serafina and Gareth, clearly expecting to find me cowering and ready to negotiate. Instead, they found a nearly empty apartment and 3 movers carrying out the last of my belongings. "What the hell is happening here?" Damien demanded, his voice cracking with shock. "I'm leaving, just like your mother requested. And I'm taking my things with me." Serafina looked around the bare space with wide eyes. "But where will we live? Where will we put the baby's things?" "That's an interesting question," I said, pulling out the rental agreement I'd retrieved from our files. "The monthly rent for this apartment is $2,500, due on the 1st of every month." Gareth's face went completely white as he processed the number. $2,500 every month? That's
"Impossible," Serafina said. "Dad's been paying that this whole time." Damien's embarrassed silence spoke volumes. He stood in the middle of our empty holding room, unable to meet anyone's eyes, finally exposed as the financial failure he'd been hiding behind my earnings. "We can't afford $2,500 a month," Gareth said quietly. "My unemployment benefits are only $800, even if I found work immediately." "Well then," I said, slinging my purse over my shoulder and heading toward the door, "I guess you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Please direct any further communication through my lawyer." I was almost to the hallway when inspiration struck. I turned back to face Damien one last time. "Oh, and Damien, I have some interesting photos of you and Clara at the Grandview Inn. Multiple occasions. Very clear images. I'm sure your divorce attorney will find them fascinating evidence of marital misconduct." The look of absolute terror that crossed his face was worth years of patient suffering. Behind him, Serafina gasped, and Elara actually stumbled backward. "You've been cheating?" Serafina's voice was high and incredulous. "While she was paying for everything? How did you—" Damien started, then stopped,
realizing any explanation would only make things worse. "Chloe at the Clover and Quill is very observant," I said casually, "and apparently, she's been documenting your regular dates for months." I walked out while they were still processing this final revelation, leaving them standing in their empty apartment with the baby supplies as the only remaining furniture. The moving truck pulled away as I settled into my car, years of accumulated possessions finally back under my control. The weeks that followed brought a series of satisfying updates. Damien agreed to the divorce settlement quickly, once faced with photographic evidence of his affair. Serafina and Gareth, unable to afford the rent, had to move back to her cramped studio apartment with the baby on the way. Most deliciously, Clara, Damien's precious girlfriend, wanted nothing to do with supporting his elderly mother or helping with his mounting alimony payments. Elara, who had spent years planning to discard me, suddenly found herself facing the very real possibility of assisted living placement. The family she'd prioritized over basic human decency was too broke and overwhelmed to provide the comfortable retirement she'd expected. My new apartment near the financial district was smaller, but entirely mine. I returned to full-time work at the pharmacy, rediscovering the satisfaction of financial independence and professional respect. For the first time in years, I was living for my own happiness instead of serving people who saw me as expendable. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about removing yourself from people who never deserved your generosity in the first place. I had finally stopped being invisible, and the view from my new life was absolutely beautiful. This story of ultimate revenge had you cheering, didn't it? Hit that like button right now. Share your comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.